that I have some teachers' pets in the classroom, and I want to make sure that you are all sharing this information, that we are live. And the reason why I need for you to share is because of censorship. We are being garbled. So we want to make sure that all of you help spread the good news about the classroom. So today we're going to be talking about shame and guilt. And I need to hit the record button. Here we go. So today we are going to be talking about shame and guilt with world-renowned Valorie Burton. And she has released, I don't have the book with me right now. I don't know if you have the book with you, Valorie. Do you have it close by?
Of course I do.
Of course she does. There it is. Okay, there is the book. It's called Let Go of Guilt. Stop beating yourself up and take back your joy. So fasten your seatbelt. It's time to learn and grow together. It's time to dance, everybody. Here we go.
The Lillian McDermott Show.
We love, we fear, bridges we burn, we make mistakes, then we live and learn. When life gets tough, and it seems like your best ain't good enough. If you're in need of hope, you know where I'll be right here. Right here, and when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here, waiting for you.
This is the place you can always turn to when you need a friend. The Lillian McDermott Show. To reach out to Lillian, visit her on the web at whenyouneedafriend.com. Now let's all learn together. Here's Lillian McDermott.
Hello, my listening and viewing friends. It's so nice we can meet each other on the air on this beautiful, best day ever. And for those of you who are new to the classroom, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go to when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide alternative ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening, as well as my viewing friends, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. Now, today, I'm really excited. I love these conversations because we don't have them enough. We don't have conversations about our biggest mistake, which we all talk about, reframing, that is our best learning experience, opportunity. And so when we are shaming ourselves or when we have guilt and we don't want to look at it, there's so many different ramifications that come from that. And so what we end up doing is we don't want to look at it, but then we drag it with us like a stack of potatoes, 50-pound bag everywhere you go for years and years and years. And so when I found out that Valorie Burton, world-renowned international speaker, author, coach, she empowers people all the time, not only herself, but others as well. And she wrote this book called Let Go of the Guilt, Stop Beating Yourself Up, and Take Back Your Joy. When I heard about that, I thought, this is the greatest conversation that we could have with ourselves and with others. And since it is our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I'm so grateful that Valorie Burton is here to do just that. Welcome, Valorie, to the classroom.
Thank you, Lillian. It's good to be here.
I'm glad that you are. So share a little bit about your background and what led your journey to becoming a coach, an author, a speaker, and all that you do to help others.
Well, I started my career in public relations and marketing, and I was always very entrepreneurial. So I had a PR firm, but I knew that while I was good at it, it wasn't really what I was passionate about. And I really just was seeking to know what my purpose was. I prayed about it. It took me quite some time when one day I just had an epiphany that I was supposed to be inspiring others to live more fulfilling lives that I would do through writing and speaking. And so I almost immediately, within a few weeks, started writing my first book, self-published that book with the goal of getting a big publisher to pick it up, which is exactly what happened the following year. And so I began writing, speaking a lot, and people kept calling me a coach, and I kept arguing with them. I was doing a lot of media at that time. And they were like, we have to call you something. And so I was like, let me look into what coaching is. And I just fell in love with it when I realized it was the one-on-one of what I was already writing and speaking about. So that is how I came to coaching. And then within a couple of years of that, went back to grad school again to study applied positive psychology, because I realized it was really the foundation, could be the academic foundation for coaching, kind of the research around what happens when things go right with us. What is it that causes us to thrive? And so that's my journey. And that's how I've, come to found the Coaching and Positive Psychology Institute, and just to continue writing these books around living a more fulfilling life.
I love the word positive psychology, but just lately there has been a lot of negativity. And I'm sure that we need a lot of that, of positivity in the world to kind of counterbalance that. It almost seems like there's a battle between good and evil, right or wrong, and nobody wins. It's like nobody can win. And so when you hear the word positive psychology, or looking at what could go right, and being in that place where you are bringing good fortune upon yourself, I think negativity, the people that want to be realist and say, okay, well, I want to be a realist, I want to think about what could go wrong. And what do you explain to somebody that wants to have that, what could go wrong versus what could go right? I call it equal opportunity. But what do you say to somebody that wants to always look at the negative to be prepared?
Well, I think first of all, we have to understand that negative is more powerful than positive. So generally it takes about 3 positives to undo a negative, but we can undo it. In a year like this, when we are bombarded with so much negative, it's even more important for us to be intentional about cultivating positive emotion. But also, when people hear positive psychology, a lot of times they think I'm just talking about positive thinking. And that's not what I'm talking about. So there's a big difference between positive thinking and accurate thinking.
There you go. I like that.
You need optimism, but there are times when you need a little dose of pessimism. That's the best type of optimism. And here's where that works. When there is a risk, when there is a real obstacle in front of you, you want to be able to see it. And so, but you still want to be positive about your ability to work around it, work through it, find the resources. So there is a spot for the negative. We just have to make sure we're applying it in the right way. It's kind of like if I said, oh, I'm going to drive, I'm in Atlanta, I'm going to drive to New York, I'm just going to think positively. I bet I only need a tank of gas.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So
2 totally different things. Yes.
Yeah. So the accurate thinking is really important, but we have to maintain. I mean, we know even with the research, an optimistic thinking style is a predictor of success. Those who have a positive outlook, who are able to see possibility, make better leaders. I mean, who's inspired by the leader who has no optimism? It's like, we're not inspired by that. So the positive is really, really important. And we have to be especially careful when we've been bombarded with negative, the way we have, especially in 2020.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, of all the things you've written over 12 books, of all the things you could have written about, you chose to write about shame and guilt. Is there a reason that you chose to do this now?
So I really just focus on guilt in the book. And the reason that this idea came along for me, because obviously with my mission and my purpose and the positive psychology background, I tend to focus on happiness, resilience, all the good stuff. And it wasn't until I dived in and started writing that it dawned on me, wait a minute, I'm writing about a negative emotion. I love studying positive emotions. So this was personal for me. And then from my personal experience, I started sharing in audiences because I speak a lot. And I noticed, especially women, when I would say, and this really came from my experience of becoming a mom after 40, and having a business, sometimes traveling, and then feeling guilty.
Sure.
When that would happen. Like, in one particular day, I was feeling that way. My husband and I together had dropped my son off at preschool. And I made the comment on the way out, "Ugh, I just feel so guilty." And he was utterly confused. He was like, "What?" I said, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like maybe I should have stayed home. Maybe I'm not supposed to be working right now. He was like, "Wasn't it your vision like years ago that you would have a business and be an author so you could have a flexible schedule because this is what you wanted. Isn't this your vision?" And it really hit me like, yeah, at 20, I said, this is what I wanted. And it took me more than 20 years for it to all finally come together. And I would share that story just about the guilt, and women would respond, whether it was their guilt around that tension between work and home, or guilt about, I live too far away from my parents, or I'm doing better than anybody else in my family and I feel guilty. It was just, sometimes it was really small things, but that guilt was really driving decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I knew I didn't want to reach the vision that I had worked so long and had gone through some really difficult times to get to,
Mm-hmm.
and not feel good about it. And then secondly, I didn't want guilt to end up driving so many of my decisions. And what I figured out was it wasn't that I just had mom guilt. Like I had always had a lot of guilt, like procrastination guilt, divorce guilt, boss guilt. Like I take off and I feel, the rest of the team's working. It was just so much guilt. So I wanted to get to the bottom of that. And I realized when I was out on the road speaking that I wasn't the only one dealing with it.
Well, it's interesting how we give words a positive or a negative spin. We can probably spin everything into a positive or a negative, but most people use guilt as shameful. Most people use guilt as, something we don't want to confront or look at. But when we look at it, we can realize that sometimes we can use guilt for good reasons. We can say, okay, well, this is going to motivate me to do something else. So let's talk about guilt. Let's understand guilt. Why is it? Do men versus women? Men, did you find in your research and in the book that men maybe are less guilty than women, or women tend to be less guilty than men?
Well, that was one of my big questions, because what I kept noticing just anecdotally is women would almost all, literally about 99%. Just say the word.
I'm sure everybody can relate that's watching. Yeah.
It's just like but what are you guilty about? And it would always show up differently, but there were some themes. And while I did find that some men dealt with guilt, generally they seemed perplexed by the things we were feeling guilty about. So there's a whole chapter in the book called the guilt gender gap, because what I discovered from the research is there really is a guilt gender gap. And there was one piece of research I just had to laugh. It was out of Spain. And their conclusion was that women are guilt prone and men are guilt deficient. And they said men start to feel more guilt in their 50s. And part of it is it's about empathy. Women generally are naturally more empathetic. We're very relational. We're always thinking about what other people are thinking and feeling, and have we caused harm somehow? Some of it is also just how we are raised.
Mm-hmm.
And the research has always shown that women worry more. So if you think about, for example, me dropping off my son at preschool, and my husband's, his reaction to what I said was, I don't even think he'd want to be home all day. He loves his friends. Like he walks in the room, they high five him. Like he's happy, and this is good for him because he's very social. And for me, I'm thinking, am I causing him harm? Am I, but when I walked through that with my husband, I realized, no, I'm not. Our child is so loved. He has a great life. And this is what I'm called to do. And at that point I had cut back my schedule a bit. Like it was all working, and I didn't need to douse it with guilt. So I think for a lot of women, there are the cultural expectations. And I couldn't even figure out, where did that come from? Like it felt so deep rooted.
Mhm.
My mother did stay home with me, but I never felt that pressure of, Valorie, this is what your life is supposed to look like. But there are a lot of cultural expectations that, and this doesn't just apply to women. I mean, there are different types of cultural expectations, but I think that is something for women is the reason that we struggle
Yeah.
sometimes, especially with the work and home, because even women who are not married, women who do not have children, still feel guilt about work after hours, which I think is a very interesting piece of research. So I think a lot of this is just expectations, which is a part of what I talk about, of how you let go of guilt.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. But do you think that perhaps maybe when we are guilty, we pass that on to our children just because it's a learned habit? By the way that we say things to ourselves, maybe our children, they take notes of everything we do. Is it possible that guilt can be something that is handed down from generation to generation?
I think the expectations are handed down. And so expectations can set us up for guilt or set us up for joy. And if you have, for example, several types of expectations that can set you up for guilt. But for example, outdated expectations, something that made sense in a different season of your life and you've held on to it. Now you can't meet that expectation anymore, but you haven't changed it. Or the vague expectation, which I find to be one that's most common, which is I should work harder. I should exercise more. I should eat better.
Mm-hmm.
Those are so vague that no matter how much you do, there's always the possibility that you could do more, which means you're always sitting there going, I could do more. And so that nagging feeling, if you ever have it, that I've never done enough, I need to do more, I'm not enough, that's guilt. We might not define it that way, but it's guilt that's set up by expectation. So if your guilt is, I should eat better, and you've been eating better, but you haven't defined better, so you're feeling guilty, define it. What would better look like? And it might be over stages. Guilt for the next 90 days looks like me cutting my soft drink intake in half and replacing it with water. It looks like me making sure that I eat vegetables with every meal. And if that's it for this 90 days, then you can measure that.
Sure.
And so we have to look at the expectations we have that we never can meet because we haven't defined them.
When we start shooting on ourselves, that sounds so much like shame. How you said you didn't write about shame, that you wrote about guilt. Is there a reason why you felt I'm going to leave shame? Because I always think of shame and guilt as like twin sisters.
Oh, they're very close. No question about it. No question. So I knew that what I felt like compelled to write about was guilt. And initially I thought I would be writing a bit more about shame in that, like as a piece, but there was so much around guilt on its own that I was like, shame has been done quite a bit.
Yes.
I define, and what I'm talking about largely in the book, not completely, is what I call false guilt.
Yes.
So guilt is I've done something wrong. And I talk about how do you walk through that when you really have done something wrong. You need to apologize, atone for it, figure out how to do better. But the bigger issue is the false guilt, which is not I've done something wrong, but I feel like I've done something wrong. And so what I'm helping people do and to walk through this process, I call it PEEL in the book. It's just a self-coaching process, is noticing those feelings and those thoughts, and then being able to push back on them because you're raising your awareness. So yes, I think some guilt can certainly turn into shame. I think the big difference though is guilt is really about what you've done. And we often define guilt in terms of an event or something very specific that we've done. The shame is how we define who we are. And so I think shame is so much more toxic than the guilt, because you can get to the core of, okay, I did that, not I am that, which I think are are different, even though they're very, very related.
Well, I'm all about, taking and owning it, seeing it. I call it being a self-cleaning oven. It's all about being a self-cleaning oven and saying, okay, right now I'm not feeling well. What is it? And we what you talk about, peeling the layers of the onion, or the layers, and understanding what the feeling is.
Yeah.
So how do we know this is guilt, that is real guilt, and that one that needs to atone for it, or one that is false, that perhaps maybe it's just an expectation that was not met, or maybe something cultural that we believe that we have not achieved? How do we discern the two and make the steps to change?
Well, first of all, noticing your, what I like to call guilt triggers. So what is it that triggers that feeling? Noticing that feeling is so very important. One of the very first things you can do when you're trying to let go of guilt is to label your guilt. And all that means is when you feel the feeling coming up, literally just say out loud or to yourself, that's guilt. Just means you're shining a light on it. You're calling it out. And what that does is it creates an interruption. And so, and we can do this with other emotions as well.
Mm-hmm.
What we're really trying to do is to keep the emotion from taking over our actions. So the question really is, okay, so if there's a guilt trigger, what am I feeling guilty about? That's your guilt statement. What am I saying to myself that I'm doing wrong? And then you're asking a very simple but powerful question that sends you in one direction or the other. Is that true?
Mm-hmm. Is that true? I love that question.
Is that true? If it is true, that's authentic guilt. Let me deal with that. That's a different path. If it's not true, then I've got to ask myself, okay, then what is true? So that you can exchange the lie for the truth and then list your evidence of that truth. It's a simple process, but boy, is it eye-opening if you will just stop. And I mean, for me, I know I gave that one example, but I think a lot of people can relate to it. I had to, I'm harming my son by having this business. It was almost like saying it out loud. I had to laugh. I was like, no, I'm not. And in fact, having two bonus daughters who are quite a bit older than my son. So we have a 15-year-old, 13-year-old, and 6-year-old now.
So you have two babysitters.
Yes, they're great sisters. I realized that it was so important to me also to just show them what's possible. Mm-hmm. For them to see that we each have a gift. Mm-hmm. We have a purpose. Most people don't even attempt to pursue it, let alone succeed in pursuing it. I feel like part of my job as a parent is helping our kids understand that they have gifts and that they're meant to use them. So when I started thinking about, am I harming my son by having this business? It was like, no. I mean, and then there's in the basic sense of you're working. No, you're providing. You're doing good things for your family. Yeah. So I began really narrowing down what I was saying to myself and acknowledging the ways in which I was going to great lengths to do the right things for our kids. Because I think sometimes those people who are most guilt prone oftentimes don't give themselves enough credit for what they do well. We know for sure, and like you were saying, that guilt can be good. And that is absolutely true. There is an upside to guilt. People who feel more guilty tend to be people to be better in relationship with, right? Because they're concerned about you. They're concerned about their impact on you. They're more likely to give. They're more generous. They make better employees. I mean, I was amazed when I started looking at the list of.
Can you imagine asking that in an interview? How guilty are you?
Are you guilt prone?
Yeah.
So, part of that also is this idea of, there are these big 5 personality traits, and the one that's most common for successful people is conscientiousness. Mm-hmm. That desire to want to do things right and do things well. And if you think about guilt, guilt's about, I think I did something wrong. So if you have strong convictions about doing things right, your standards, when you aren't able to meet it, is probably going to lead to a lot of guilt. So when I really was, like I said, delving into the research, I was like, wow, I actually took this personality test, and my conscientiousness was like the 99th percentile. And all of a sudden, everything made really good sense.
Yeah.
Because of those concerns about trying to do things right, et cetera. So if you're feeling guilty, pat yourself on the back. You probably make a good friend, a good partner, in many ways, a good employee, a good boss. I mean, there's a lot of good, because guilt, the feeling of guilt can say, don't do that. That's not right, or that's not fair.
Yeah. And that is a good, with a moral compass, guilt is really good.
Yes.
Without a moral compass, however, guilt is non-existent.
Yeah, and that's the purpose of it, don't you think? I mean, there's a reason that we feel guilt.
Yeah.
It's a message. The problem is guilt is also a debt. And so if you're feeling false guilt, you feel like you owe. And that's where it changes your behavior. That's where you can be manipulated with a guilt trip. That's where you don't speak up for yourself because you feel that sense of false guilt, or you don't negotiate, or you don't ask for what you're worth. I mean, it shows up in so many ways. You say no, you say yes when you want to say no. So that was my bigger concern, even than the feeling, was, what are you doing or not doing in your life? And the real reason is false guilt, not even authentic guilt.
It's our duty. And I want to ask all of you who are watching right now, and you're sitting in the front row in the classroom, have you experienced guilt? Do you have any questions for Valorie today? Where are you from? So let us know, because unless you put your thumbprint in the comment section, we don't know you're with us, because I cannot see who you are. So it'd be nice to know if you have any questions. But can you relate to this? Can you relate to this false guilt and authentic guilt? Because we all deal with it. I know that I love that question. Is it true? But that question, we need to stop and say, if we don't have the clarity to really be true to ourselves, because we don't want to look at the truth, what do you suggest people do as far as getting an accountability partner? I mean, where do you turn to when you are so focused within that you cannot have a good judgment on if it's true or not true? You're too invested.
So I think it's good to ask a friend who is wise, who can tell you the truth, help you work through that truth. Obviously, I always think a coach is good if you have a counselor or therapist to talk it through with. One of the things I created for the book is a 6-part video series, just short 10 to 12 minute videos that end up going through the topics throughout the book, with coaching and discussion questions. So if you want to read it together and support each other, this is a way to do it. I realize that especially for women, not just women, but especially for women, we need in a topic like this to be able to talk it out. So if you get the book, the 6-part series it's free. You just join the book club and
Absolutely. And Valorie, you just said something that I just did not even mention. We're giving away 2 books. Yay! We're giving away 2 books. Valorie is very generous. She's giving away 2 books of Let Go of Guilt, Stop Beating Yourself Up, and Take Back Your Joy. So this is what you need to do. You need to claim it. Claim it in the comment section. Claim it if you're on YouTube and you're watching it. If you are listening on podcast or watching later on BitChute, make sure that you claim it, and then text me at 407-373-5959. Texting it is what your ultimate. You see, if things are too easy for you, then you're not going to appreciate it. So declare it that you are going to be guilt-free, or that you're going to learn how to understand the guilt that's within you and work with it, accept it, embrace it, and work around. This book is really good for that. It gives you lots of options. So 2 people, claim it wherever you're watching from, and then text me at 407-373-5959. I will pick the winners out on Friday. So I'll give all of you time to claim it. If you watch this later on, claim it, and then text me 407-373-5959. I think we're going to be giving away a couple of books. Also, we're going to be for other. No, I think this is the only one this week. So we'll wait till Friday to do that. Now, for those of you who are watching or tuning in for the first time, I just want you to know that this is where we take ownership for our life. This is where we take responsibility. That is the number one word that we focus on in here. And people just don't like the word responsibility because it's associated with shame, blame, fault, guilt, all those things. Okay, fine, I'm going to take responsibility. But responsibility is such an empowering word, because if we create everything, if you take 100% responsibility for everything that you do, or everything that happens around you, if you take 100% responsibility, if you created it, you can uncreate it. And being guilty is one of the ways that you can uncreate that guilt by learning how to work with it as well. So I want to encourage you to go to whenyouneedafriend.com. And of course, please become a subscriber, because, you know, they say that in October, these classes like this, or these shows like this, that are sharing information that are being censored, may no longer be, but I am grateful to YouTube and Facebook for the time that we have here. But you need to subscribe to BitChute and also to my channel just in case. So make sure you do that now, because this is all we have. This is all, now is all we have. And so while you're there, make sure that you like and follow me on my social media, and also subscribe at YouTube for my YouTube channel. And again, I'm going to say BitChute. And while you're there, make sure you check out my sponsors, and also check out my affiliates. Keep Me Safe Organics, all organic beauty products that are going to keep you safe. All these places, when you go there, you get percentage 10% off, 20% off. First Alternative Care Telemedicine for $19.99, your entire family, for your doctors and your dermatologist, and that's unlimited. And behavioral health counseling, 3 hours for the entire family, for 3 hours a year for the entire family for $19.99. So take advantage of the bulk viewership and you get that special pricing. We have the pharmacy in Merritt Island, Live Longer Medical, Ground Therapy, Brain Tap, First Alternative therapies with Avasia, so many different ways to naturally heal your body. Make sure that you're living in a toxic-free environment and you're taking your life back. So please support my sponsors the way that they are supporting the classroom. And finally, you can become an enrolled student in the classroom by donating your time, your talent, your treasure. So if you can donate your treasure, $1 all the way to $1,000 a month, whatever you want to donate, you can. I am just so grateful because I've decided to change things a little bit. This is our classroom and we can all help the classroom grow. And there's different ways you can do so. So today we're talking about guilt. We're talking about giving away 2 books. Make sure you declare it. I'm so glad that I'm seeing some questions here. Make sure you declare it, and then you text me at 407-373-5959. I want to encourage you also to go to ValorieBurton.com and learn more about her coaching as well as her books that she has written, because maybe something will resonate other than guilt. I mean, you've written about so many, and thank you so much, Valorie, for coming into the classroom. You could have been anywhere right now, but you chose to be here, so I'm very grateful.
Well, thanks for having me.
So all the books that you've written, what would you say is your number one priority when you're choosing these themes? What seems to be, like for me, it's responsibility, taking ownership. And for you, is there a particular theme?
I would say that underneath it all, the theme is around resilience and happiness. I really, in order to live a fulfilling life, and my very definition of success is that it's a harmony of purpose, resilience, and joy. That we need to know what we're here for. You are here for a purpose. It's not an accident. your experiences, your gifts are meant to make a positive impact. And part of your job, I believe, is saying, well, what is that impact for me? And the resilience to be successful, we have to bounce back. We're going to hit obstacles, disappointments, setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
But are you successful if there's no joy? If it's just all work and difficulty? And we have to be able to find the joy in the things that we do. So I would say that's the core theme of what I write about.
Purpose, resilience, and joy. And I totally agree with you. Everything does happen for a purpose. And the moment we step back and we look at it, we can use that purpose for passion, or we can use that purpose for poison. Either way, we're in choice. And sometimes, and I learned this just recently, it just blew me away. John Gray was Venus and Mars. I don't know if you're familiar with. So he said something, we were talking about, I forget what the topic was, but we started talking about people that are can become addicted with becoming a victim. It actually releases endorphins that creates that. And that, as a coach, I'm a certified life coach as well. Sometimes I wonder why people don't want to leave that victim mentality. And sometimes within that, the people that are love to be victims also like to dish out the guilt.
So a lot of this is toxic behavior that is learned. And if you've not seen anything else, it can be difficult to break out, but it's not impossible. And that's why I think awareness is so important. And this is true with guilt as well. That was one of the pieces of research. It was so like, what? Guilt actually does also release these chemicals in the brain that are positive and addictive. Again, we're talking about the upside of guilt.
Yeah.
And so that is about wanting to do the right thing. So we have to notice, and sometimes you don't immediately know what to do about it. That's where I was like, at least I'm noticing I'm feeling guilty, but I don't want to feel this way anymore. So what do? That's the start of the journey. Don't beat yourself up if you don't know the answer yet, but start looking for that answer.
So let's start looking for that answer. Let's start looking for solutions, because I'm all about solutions. I love solutions. Yes, feel the feeling. Yes, call it, name it, whatever we want to do. But what is the solution? And you give a lot of solutions in your book. And so would you like to quickly share some of the tips?
Absolutely. So first, like I said, label your guilt, the peel method, pinpointing your guilt trigger, examining your thoughts. What am I saying? Is it true? Not true? Being able to exchange that lie for the truth and list your evidence. That's really huge. But a couple of other things I think are really important. I mentioned expectations, being willing to reset your expectations. What are the expectations you have that you're falling short of that are causing guilt? And how might you adjust that expectation? How might you set yourself up for success and joy rather than guilt and beating yourself up? I mentioned how guilt is a debt. And so if it's a debt, it says you owe. There's a lot of ways that can show up. And it's important to notice it. It can show up, I say beating yourself up. That's a form of punishment, right? Because you owe. Overcompensating. Being over responsible, doing for others what they should be doing for themselves. I mean, there's so many of these ways. So beginning to notice what is happening is so very important. And then saying, okay, what would be a better approach to this? Another piece is just, even before you set the expectations, getting clear about your own values. Because I think a lot of what can get us into trouble is that others can be very definite about their values. And if we have not gotten clear about what ours are, we can spend our time trying to live up to what everybody else thinks our lives should look like. And your life, the way you are supposed to be living it, simply may not look like the people around you. That doesn't make it wrong. So you've got to get clear about your values. And your values are simply, what matters to me? What is important to me? And what is important to you may not be as important to others. And so if you're living up to their values, you're going to find yourself in a great deal of conflict. So those are some of the things that just initially come to mind.
And I love the chapter in the book. I glanced at the book and I was looking as much as I could in the PDF copy that I have. And I love your conclusion where you set 8 secrets to letting go of guilt for good. And so we can, if we have some time, we can maybe address those. But Galina has a question for you, and I think that young mothers may have this. And she says, guide because I think, okay, hold on a second. Did I miss something here? It says guide because I think I am not enough for my kids, or because I think I should do more. And you had mentioned that earlier in the class about that personal guilt towards our children. Do you think that is, did you find that there were a lot of commonalities that women share with guilt?
Yes. So there was a lot around. I was surprised. Eating and exercising was really big. There was a lot around that. Mm-hmm. Parenting was another. And then just past choices and mistakes that we beat ourselves up for. That was pretty major. As a new mom, Galina, I would say, number one, congratulations. I hope you savor these moments, even though some of them might feel stressful or overwhelming at times.
Just wait till they're teenagers.
I mean, it's just such a blessing. And if you're even thinking about, am I not doing enough for my kids? Your children sure are blessed because you're a mom who's thinking about doing the best that she can for her kids. I would say define what that looks like. Mm-hmm. Define what it looks like in your mind to be a good mom to your kids. Be really specific about it. Don't, it's not about what everybody else is doing, but what is your vision as a mom? And how will you measure that? What are some of the simple things that you would do every day or every week that would tell you that you're on the right track? Jot them down so that you can go, yes, I'm doing this, as opposed to this kind of vague thing where maybe you're on social media or you're somewhere, you're listening to somebody else and you're thinking, wow, I'm not doing that. But that might be perfectly okay. But you have to first define what that looks like for you. And I got to tell you, just savoring and being kind to yourself, I would suggest you put that on the list, because ultimately at points in the future, you're teaching your kids also how to treat themselves. You're teaching them how to have grace for themselves and self-compassion. So I hope that you'll try some of those things, as well as just clearly defining what are some of the things I want to make sure I do as a mom, and then do them. Are they reasonable? Do them. If they're not reasonable, let them go.
Yeah, absolutely. Valorie, as I'm 57 years old and I've raised my children and I have grandchildren and great-grandchildren at this point in my life. I know, right? Sometimes I find it hard to believe, but I see that when we were growing up, because I'm much older than you, when we were growing up, we had a different set of expectations from our parents than I see now. And I'm not saying anything about my children. I'm just saying in general, I see a lot of children out there just staring at the screen and parents using the tablets as a babysitter. So, and we know that some of these these games and shows and lots of flashing lights and all that can cause some damage to our children. But a lot of parents don't know that they just want the kid to be quiet. And I'm finding more and more and more that people are having a hard time defining their values. They're having a hard time, and they've forgotten those values because comfort becomes more important than taking a stand. What would you advise someone that is having a difficult time, not just identifying, but now their children are getting older, and the children, because they just, maybe entitlement is the word I'm trying to use, that these values have not been nailed in the heart.
I think that there are so many more dynamics today.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's harder. So I grew up mostly in the 80s, partly in the 70s. And while we had obviously television, I mean, I remember when cable became a thing.
Yeah.
And that, and video games became a thing, right?
Yeah.
But nothing like what we have now.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'm not sure what I would have been doing or what my parents would have done if we had the things we have now. Additionally, there's so much written into the electronics today, not just for the kids, but especially for the adults, that is addictive. It is meant to suck you in, and engineers are hired to make sure that your eyeballs stay on that screen, because the longer they're on that screen, the more advertising dollars they can get. So I think a lot of parents struggle with the electronics. I think that for many people, they feel so overwhelmed that it just becomes there's that inner conflict. I don't want my kids to be on the screen so much, but number one, their friends are. Number two, I've got way too much to do. We have so many more parents having to raise their children alone. There is a lot that goes into that. So you're right. You have to decide, what are my values? Because when you take a stand, it's often hard. Now, it doesn't have to stay hard. Once you kind of say, no, this is the new expectation, it might be rocky for a minute, but it also is going to take some commitment, because someone has to fill in then, right? If there's not that entertainment. And I think that's a really great example of what that looks like. Yeah, that means you have to get off your phone too.
Mm-hmm.
That means you have to go sit together and play or have conversation. And I really believe there are a lot of reasons this has. Some of it is just it's convenient and easy, but some of it is the sad reality of the culture that we're in today, the economy that we are in, where we have so many more households where both people absolutely have to work and there's no flexibility, or one person's trying to do everything. And Lillian, that is just hard.
Yeah.
So if this resonates with you, I'd say number one, do not beat yourself up. The question is, in light of your circumstances, how do you want to show up? Looking back 10 years from now, what will you wish you had done? I know one thing for certain, there's no way I will have regretted spending more quality time with my children, or getting off of social media, more, taking time for myself, a bubble bath, walks in nature.
Right. You're right.
Get clear about what those values are, and not to beat yourself up, but to say, and what would that look like? What specifically could I do that would take me a step closer to living my values every day?
And I guess that's a question that we need to start with. There's that question, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, and, what comes first, freeing ourselves and knowing what we want, or knowing what our values are, and then working backwards with that. It's sometimes, you describe the world perfectly. We are distracted by social media, trying to keep up with the likes and the follows and all of that. That right there is such a huge chunk of time that is just wasted. That if we were to say, okay, I'm going to practice self-control and only be on social media maybe 1 hour a day, and that's while I'm going to the bathroom, or something, like setting some goals and parameters, or whatever. But I find that
an hour a day at this point is the average.
The average is an hour.
And so think about this. If you said, I'm going to limit it to 30 minutes, and you cut it in half, 30 minutes a day times 30 days a month.
Oh, yeah.
900 minutes. What is that? 15 hours a month, 180 hours a year. What would you do
With that time, huh?
80 hours a year?
Yeah,
What
that
is
is.
the thing you keep talking about and I don't have time?
Mhm. That is the number one excuse that I hear all the time. If I just had time. And I remember there was one time, and I had to really. So, do you ever find yourself trying to not just coach somebody just because you recognize BS and you want to say something, but at the same time there's no permission to say it, and you just buy into the lie, buy into the excuse, buy into, and that is probably the most that I just want to just like say, okay, well, how much time do you spend on social media? How much time do you spend, watching television? How much time do you spend? But of course, that rubs people the wrong way. Don't change my excuse with facts. And we believe our lie. And I think that what you say,
Easier.
it is easier. It is easier to believe the lie. And so what you're saying is to hold that mirror to yourself and say, okay, where is it? Is this true? Is it true that I do have time? Because we all have time to do what we love. And, and when you're talking about, and this is where I get censored, when you're talking about the video that are intended to addict a child, and television does the same thing. Pharmaceuticals do the same thing, and food do the same thing. And then we say to ourselves, oh, I eat well, or I'm taking that pill. But we can actually change the way we eat, so we may not need that pill all the time. So there's so many things we tell ourselves. And that's why I asked the question earlier. How do you really look at truth? How do you really look at truth when we have blind spots? We see the plank, we see the speck in our neighbor's eye, but we refuse to notice the plank in ours. What are some wake-up calls, Valorie, that you can share?
Well, the question is, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want? And whatever that is, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to change? I mean, I recall when I finally wrote my first book, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I realized that I had been talking about writing a book for some time. And my first book was my third attempt at writing a book. And one day I was talking to her and I was saying, oh, I'm writing a book. And she was a very popular radio host. And so she's like, oh yeah, let me know when it's done so I can have you on. I was driving home and I was like, you're not writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you keep saying that? But that truth, saying that to myself and realizing how frustrated and actually disgusted I was with myself, that I was lying to my friend.
Mm-hmm.
That was my turnaround.
Isn't that beautiful?
I said, don't you tell another person you're writing a book until you start writing this book. But that was the impetus. That is when I started writing. So truth is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
We can say, oh, I'm beating myself up because I haven't done it yet. Or we can say, if I can face the truth, I can make a decision about what I want and what I'm willing to do. I wrote that book at night and on the weekends while running a PR firm. And that was not easy, but I wanted it. So I was like, where can I find the time? So this is not about beating yourself up, but sometimes you do have to ask very pointed questions. Is it true? What do I want? What am I willing to give up for that? And while you're doing all that, again, when you find yourself beating yourself up too much, because some people will,
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself, if my best friend were in the same situation, what would I say to her or to him? In other words, talk to yourself as kindly
Mm-hmm.
as you talk to the people you care about, because none of us is perfect. None. This is all a learning journey, but the truth is powerful. So be willing to say, oh, it might not even look good, might not make me look good.
Yep.
That's fine. This isn't about looking good. This is about you becoming the best you can be and fulfilling your potential and noticing the truth is such an important part of being your authentic self.
You know, I so resonate with that. I love that. And I'm glad that because sometimes it's very, very difficult. Actually, a lot of times, not sometimes. And that's part of getting out of our comfort zone. It is so important because once we do that, once we get out of our comfort zone, we realize that our comfort zone gets bigger. Because a lot of people don't know, I am very shy. People, when I say that, when they say, oh, say something about yourself that people don't know, I go, I'm shy. And everybody goes, ha, 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 ha. Well, I hated being shy. I hated being shy and being the invisible girl in the group, or that's what I wanted to be. But I was an extrovert. I wanted to be out there, so I expanded my comfort zone little by little to the point where my comfort zone is so large that people don't even know. And now that I know the truth about getting out of my comfort zone, I say I live outside my comfort zone so that when challenges, things come in, you know what I'm talking about. When things come, I say yes. I say yes, unless there's a resonating no, like that is not what I'm about. But I figure out how to do it. God does that. At the right moment, I'm equipped. I know that I get the tools just like that, just because it's the right thing to do, not because I'm afraid. And so I always quote the great philosopher Meatloaf, who said, sang the song, I would do anything for, everybody knows it's love, right? But we can add anything to it. We can add, marriage, have a better marriage, to have a better job, write a book, whatever it is, be a better mom. But what Meatloaf says after that is, but I won't do that. So that's what we all sing to ourselves all the time. We need to stop singing that song. We need to say, what are we willing to do? And I love your book because it says, okay, how good is guilt? It could be good. There's prices and payoffs. And I love how you've, identified that for us. Any last words? Would you like to share anything for people that are just tuning in right now and they need to go back and listen to the whole replay? What would you say to them about the book or guilt?
Number one, there's the authentic guilt and the false guilt. If you really have done something wrong, look, it is freeing to just speak truth, to reckon with that and do better and apologize and forgive yourself. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't get forgiveness from the person, being able to say, okay, here's what I've learned. Here's how I'm going to change. But that false guilt that is so persistent, the feeling that you've done something wrong when you haven't, is dangerous because it can, like I said, control your decisions. You're doing stuff. People have chosen careers out of this. I did so many interviews. It was like people getting married out of guilt, people, choosing careers out of guilt, people staying in jobs out of guilt, people doing all sorts of things, overcompensating with their kids, spoiling their kids out of guilt. And all of us, I know, want to be free. And so starting with, is that true? Have I actually done something wrong? The answer is no. You want to get onto that path of letting that guilt go. But the most important point here, and why I wrote the book, is so that you can take back your joy. I learned in this for myself something I had not thought of before I started writing, which is that happiness is a risk, but guilt is safe. It's kind of developed in my childhood of feeling like the carpet was being pulled out from under me several times, every couple of years, with different things happening, grandparents passing, my parents separating and later divorcing, just several things. And I realized that I was the kind of person who I didn't realize I was afraid when I would get too happy, because I was afraid that I was going to fall and that fall was going to be too huge. So if I put some guilt in there, I can take my happiness down a few notches. That way, if it goes away, it won't be so bad. Mm-hmm. Many of us do this in many ways with our negative emotions. And what I want most for you is to take back your joy, to let go of the guilt so that each and every day you can feel authentically happy not be manipulated by the guilt trippers, feel good about the good decisions that you're making, and tell the truth about bad decisions, learn from them, and just let them go. That's how you get your joy back.
I love it. I love it. And so for those of you, if you want a copy of the book, if you want to show a copy of the book, Valorie, go ahead and claim it, 407-373-5959. And we are going to draw two people's names. You'll go into the winner's basket. We'll draw two people's name and hopefully you'll be the winner. Anyway, you can always get it at Amazon or check it out at ValorieBurton.com. And please remember, we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at WhenYouNeedAFriend.com. This is Lillian McDermott and Valorie Burton, wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever. There you go. All right, hold on a second.
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before taking any steps to improve your life.
So you said such a powerful statement right before we go. And with the teacher's pet, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. But you said happiness is a risk and guilt is safe. That is so powerful.
It was transforming for me. I had to dig deep and understand what on earth was going on. I would just throw a little guilt in there. Why am I feeling guilty? Our minds are very complex. And the more we can understand them, the more we can begin making new choices out of that awareness. That helps us to undo some of the really dysfunctional things that we can do. And that's been a real journey for me.
Yeah.
But one that I'm so happy I've been on because it's really made a huge difference.
You know, and people don't understand that. That comfort zone of pain. And one of the things that I realized, this comfort zone, people want to be comfortable, but comfortable can kill you. Comfortable can kill you. And people don't think of comfort as can kill you. Some people get beaten every night. Some people drink a bottle of alcohol every night, or, maybe obsess over or stress over things. That is their comfort zone and it could kill them. And so stepping outside, that first step, when you realize that for you, what was your first step? Because it takes did you see the movie? We Bought a Zoo.
No.
There's a movie called We Bought a Zoo. And there's one line I remember from the movie. And he said, it only takes 20 seconds of courage to take the first step. And I always say, oh my God, we all have that. We can commit to 20 seconds, but then afterwards, it's just easier to take that next step. So what was it for you once you realized that powerful statement?
One, I journaled through it. Like I wanted to understand what was going on. I realized some things I was saying to myself that they actually weren't true at all, or that, I would feel guilty around my writing and this whole procrastinating and then feeling guilty because I'm procrastinating, not doing what I'm supposed to do. And I realized for myself that I had to decide that I was willing to risk disappointment. I was willing to risk being this happy and falling really far because I'm living one time. And for me, it was a journey of trusting God. I think we often, we pray in ways that say, I'm going to trust God to do what I'm asking for. And I had to decide that I would trust God, period. Mm-hmm. No matter what happens. When that moment comes, if that moment were to ever come, I trust that I will be able to be resilient in the face of it. In the meantime, since life is so very good, I'm going to enjoy every ounce of that joy. The thing is that we know, even from the research, that that positive emotion builds like a cushion so that when you have a setback, it's like landing on a mattress as opposed to landing on concrete. So one of the best things you could do is to embrace all the joy and all the happiness you possibly can, because that actually better equips you for when anything negative happens. And for me, it was just, it was a decision. Like, how am I going to waste these moments feeling guilty? Why? Let me just show up with joy. Let me drop Alex off. And when he walks in the preschool classroom and the kids go, Alex, and high-five him, let me just laugh and soak that in, because that won't be forever. And then let me go do my work and be happy doing that work. And let me come back. And when I see him, give him a big hug and a kiss. And let's talk all about your day. Let me just live fully and embrace the joy of those really special moments. And sometimes even the moments that don't seem so special, but they're still good.
Yeah. You're really talking about being in the moment, being in the now. And I remember I was going through, after I married my husband, I was so happy. And I had that, like, something's going to go wrong. It's like, don't get too happy because something's going to get wrong. This is like a long time ago. And I remember I was so madly in love with my husband. I'm still married to him. I'm still madly in love with him today. And I remember, because he used to travel a lot, and I heard a song and I could just see his face. And all of a sudden I started thinking, what if he dies? What if his plane crashes? Or what if and I was going through all these scenarios, like, to prepare myself. And I remember that moment, I had to pull over to the side of while I was driving, I had to pull over. And I was just crying, like as if it had happened. Because that's the one thing I've learned since, that we think it and therefore it happens. Our body doesn't know the difference. And at that moment, I was sobbing uncontrollably when I heard a voice, and I know it's the voice of God, the voice from within, the spirit within me, say, why do you mourn the living? And all of a sudden I went, what? And I heard it again. Why are you mourning the living?
Oh, that's powerful.
And so it reminds me of when they went back to the tomb and Jesus says, why are you looking for the living among the dead? And so that kind of like reminded me of that. And I remember at that moment, that was a changing moment for me, that I am going to be in the moment. And whenever I have to deal with those tears, I will deal with them when I must deal with them. Prior to that, not one single tear.
There you go. I think more of us struggle with that than we realize, because it's not something you would admit.
I think I've shared this before in the classroom, but there have been so many other times in my life that I could have gone down that hole. But that moment, just like with your moment, is it true? I'm not going to say I lied to my friend about the book. I'm in the process of writing a book too. And, I stopped writing. And it was because, you get you get these thoughts in your mind that, okay, now is not the right time. I'm going to pick it up when it's the right time. Well, I finally said, it is the right time. So I sent it to my editor and I said, okay, can you start editing? Because I think the reason I'm not writing is because I want to know if I'm doing okay. Yeah. So I don't want to have to erase 1,000 words or 100,000 words if I only have to erase, or delete maybe 6 chapters or whatever.
Right.
So, we all make excuses and we believe the excuse. Mm-hmm. And I think it's wonderful that you are a self-cleaning oven. And I think we all need to become self-cleaning ovens where we can say, I love me enough to tell me the truth. Because maybe not somebody's going to tell me the truth because they might be afraid that they might hurt my feelings. And so it's good
that's the first step to getting unstuck, is telling yourself the truth.
I love it.
You can't coach someone who's not telling the truth, because then what are you coaching around?
That's right.
You
That's
cannot
right.
get unstuck until you acknowledge the truth so that you can then work with that truth.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. I'm sure you have like certains, like, okay, I will not coach a narcissist. I won't. And if someone's lying to me, I don't confront a liar. Because I've played out that conversation and I've played this out before. It's like, you lied. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. How good is that? So
I think I have very strong boundaries around that. And I think, and that's from life experience. At some point you get, something's not quite right. But I think it's so important to not be afraid of the truth. The truth is where it all starts.
And I'll let that be the final word. Thank you so much, Valorie, for coming on and blessing us with your wisdom at such a young age that you're able to help so many people. Well, I have to say such a young age.
10 years apart.
Hey, listen, 10 years is a lot. It's a lot in dog years. Let's just put it this way. I don't have a walker, so, but I am older than you. So it's wisdom can come. I have learned from my grandchildren. I have, like when I was going through coaching, I learned there was a 13-year-old in my course when I first went for me for personal growth, not as coach, and I had a 13-year-old and an 80-year-old.
Wow.
And this is the old me. I thought, what am I going to learn from these two? Right. And although I know you can learn from everybody, I still had some limiting belief issues that I needed to overcome. But wow, when you open yourself to somebody else's truth or be curious instead of critical, life changes, just life changes. And so it's so great to be able to have a conversation with such a wise woman. So thank you so much, Valorie, for coming on to the classroom today and being our teacher.
Thank you so much, Lillian. I enjoyed this very rich conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. And for those of you who want a copy of the book, show the book. The book is called Let Go of the Guilt, Stop Beating Yourself Up and Take Back Your Life. And it is wonderful. That's a great place to start, is to just understand guilt and how it can turn things around for the better. And so please remember, claim it down wherever you're watching. And if you're listening later on YouTube, BitChute, or on podcasts, you too. Friday, we're going to be pulling 2 names. So get your name in the winner's basket. Text me at 407-373-5959. And for now, we're going to say goodbye. Thank you so much for watching and tuning in today. And we look forward to, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them later on as well. Okay.